Right, here we are, part 2. Quick costume change for Judith there.
Well, a warmer jacket. It's winter time in Australia.
Yeah, okay. And so we were talking about self-love. Do you think you'd finished on talking about self-love and we can go on to the next question?
Yes, we can go on to the next question.
Okay, so the next question that you put was, what is meant by a soulmate?
Yes. A soulmate is a term that's just thrown around the community without understanding what it is. People think that a soulmate is your perfect match and that everything will be perfect and you will never share any emotional pain, disappointment ever again. And it's not quite like that. Soulmates, we travel in a soul family. And that soul family can be just somebody in our street, a member in our street that we make good friends with. Yeah. It can be our parents, but not both of them. It might be a brother or sister, but only one of them. So we travel with soul families, and we do that for our own personal growth, and we help each other experience the human reality of life. That means we support each other in times of grief, disappointment, loss. And so in my soul family, I'll just give an example. The love of my life, my father-in-law. I met my father-in-law when I was 17, saw immediately that he was a soulmate. And we were best friends. We lived in each other's shadow for 42 years until he died. But at the same time, in that family, Paul was a soulmate, my husband, for 54 years before he died. Yeah. In my own family, my eldest brother, Chris, he's a soulmate. And so when my husband, Paul, died, I got the information at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock on a Friday night. So I put it on the family Facebook group. And at 7 o'clock in the morning, somebody knocked on the front door, and it was my brother, Chris, my soulmate. And he walked in the door, put his arms around me and cried on my shoulder and said, "I loved Paul." And he just was pouring out his soul. Anyway, so that's his support. He was the first one on the scene in the whole family because he's a soulmate and I'm his soulmate. And it's something that I've helped him to understand over all the years we've known each other. Yeah. So my eldest brother is nearly 80, right? So, well, no, he is 80. He's 80 years old. He just doesn't look it. Right. He's a typical Capricorn. He looks 15 years younger than he actually is. No. So now his wife, she is a member of the soul family. So she's come in and married him, and she's his soulmate, but she's a member of the same soul family. Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And we have an adopted child within the family, right, who is a soul member. Wow. So the soul member being adopted coming into the family, think of the lesson there. Right. Wow. They come into the family adjusts to someone who is not of their blood, but is of their spirit. So right. There's lessons to be learned in, do you cocoon the child up? Do you rear the child the same as your own? How do you approach the child? What's the learning? When do you tell them they're adopted, if they've been adopted as a baby? How do you cope with finding their parents and supporting them? All the lessons that go in there. But yeah. From the adopted child's point of view, what's the adopted child? A sense of belonging, a sense of communion, a sense of friendship, companionship, all those types of things. So that just gives you an understanding of what a soul family is. A soul family or soulmates, they are all soulmates. There's no such thing that the soulmate is the love of your life or your partner, right? Yeah. The soulmate, your soulmate could simply be your younger sister or your cousin or a grandparent. Yes, my grandmother on my mother's side was a soul member of the soul family, but not on my father's side. Right. Yeah, it's interesting.
It's very fascinating. I mean, there's a few fascinating questions in response to that. So when you started off and talking about when you saw your father-in-law for the first time, and
Oh,
you
yes.
knew he was a soulmate, but and obviously you're somebody who's got these kind of unique
Yep.
dimensions to you, sensory
Yep.
wise. Not everybody necessarily has that, but so
Yes, they
what
do. They
so
do.
they
They
do?
do.
Okay,
They
right, okay.
do. They
Ah,
do.
okay,
If you're talking to someone, you have a conversation with someone, and the conversation goes on and on and on, and you sit there engaged in this deep conversation, and you feel as though you've known each other all your life,
right, okay.
that's a soulmate.
Okay, all right, okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to explain that so that viewers can
That
understand
yeah, for
when
sure.
a soulmate comes into your
That's a
life.
really good because when you were talking about adoption, I think I'd shared with you in a private call. You know, there's adoption in my family, and there's a kind of painful story in and around that. And so sometimes uh, adoptions can work beautifully, and
Mhm.
sometimes perhaps they can leave another kind of legacy as well.
Right.
So
Because painful legacies are the greatest part of a soul's learning than loving relationships,
right,
because you learn trust, you learn forgiveness, you learn tolerance, you learn understanding, you learn compassion, you learn to um, look at the fractures within the relationship.
yeah.
There's more learning in dysfunctional relationships than there is in loving ones.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I suppose the challenge can be when you're somebody who's trying to be loving and there's
Yes, yes,
dysfunction, heartache, trauma kind of going on, and the other person isn't prepared to address that pattern within
that's
them.
right. Well, that's your learning and
Hmm.
their learning.
Yeah,
So the fact that you see somebody, um, one not reciprocating, one trying to understand and trying to love that person, and the other person rejecting them, there's learning in both causes. So you have to look at how you have to step back at that relationship. We've all had it. Everybody in life experiences that.
hmm.
You have to sit back, look at that relationship, and then understand what's the purpose of it.
Uh-huh.
What's it doing for me personally? Have I grown from it? What have I learned from it? What do I understand from it? How has it advanced me in my reality? What have I got a better understanding of? Yes.
Now, so here's an interesting question, I think. Are auras passed on genetically? So, for example, if somebody is adopted and they, like in my family experience, it seemed to be there was a pattern of personality
Yep.
or,
Yep.
and so I'm intrigued whether it
All right.
would something like that be encoded in the aura?
No, what I'll explain now is the eternal mind.
Okay.
The eternal mind exists. That's the all energy, our connection to collective consciousness, right?
Hmm.
Universal consciousness.
Yeah.
It's our connection to everyone else in our life and in our spirit. So spirit guides, deceased family members, everything. So the eternal mind is the tool by which we function as people.
Yeah.
To understand what happens when you get hereditary things come through, right? They don't come through in the human aura, because the human aura is a reflection of who you are and how you respond and react to life. That's basically what it is. It's what you see, it's what you think, it's what you feel, and what you hear. That's the human aura. That's a good way of understanding it.
Okay.
But the patterns that you're talking about, they come from the eternal mind, because
Okay.
the eternal mind was there when the baby was conceived.
Yeah.
And so the eternal mind sees that lesson. But if you're looking at past relationships, past lives, all that coming through, it's the eternal mind that brings those through, not the human aura. The human aura is a response to how you respond or
Okay.
react to that situation.
Okay,
Mm.
I really appreciate that distinction and that explanation. That's really fascinating. So where do we get to? What is the difference between a soulmate and a best friend?
Ah, a best friend can be somebody that you share one particular thing with. It can be a love of something, like it could be two young boys grow up and they go to every football match, and then as they move into adulthood, they still call each other and off they go to a football match. But other than that, they're not involved in each other's lives in a different way. You get people who go off to fishing, people who go to a gym and they meet each other and they become real good friends, and they might go out and have a drink, and they might go to a party or something, but they're not long term. And friendships dissipate, right? Soulmates stick together like that, but friendships dissipate. So you can have a friend at school, your best friend in kindergarten, right? And your best friends, you're gonna be together forever, but you're not.
Okay.
Best friends in high school, people that you meet in the workplace that you're good friends with, and you might have 2 or 3 years and then the friendship disappears. So what you learn from those friendships is belonging outside of your own circle. It gives you space to be someone different than who you are as a brother, as a son, as a parent. Yeah. It gives you time out. So friendships, dissipating friendships, give us time out from the responsibilities, our own self-image.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, we could come from a dysfunctional family where everybody argues, mum and dad are drunk all the time. We can have that, but we meet a friend, they make a friendship, and we step out of that into this friendship that cocoons us in support and care, and we can be somebody else. But the friendship dissipates. So we have to go back to that environment, because that's how our soul learns. But the soul gives us friendships to be able to dissipate from whatever it is that we are finding overtaxing, overwhelming.
Okay. Lovely. So does true love have different colors in the aura?
Oh, yes. Definitely, yes. Paul and I met at the age of 17. It took us 10 days to start making plans for our wedding. That's falling in love.
Yeah,
In
that's
our
a
auras at the time, our auras at the time was a dominance of apricot.
okay.
And yes, a dominance of apricot, which is rare in a loving environment, because apricot is the color of self-nurturing. So we were nurturing and counseling each other.
No.
He was nurturing and counseling me, who was seeing everybody in technicolor and
Yeah.
didn't want to do that,
Yeah.
and felt as though I didn't belong in this human race, right? I don't know where I belonged. But then he grew up in a family that was non-communicative. His father was in the army. He never had any friends. Paul never had any friends, because they moved every 2 years. And
Oh,
when he was at home with his mother, his father was always overseas. So he never had that relationship. He never grew up with aunties, cousins, uncles, grandparents, never knew any of them. So being the typical Capricorn, and a number 5 at that, he just pulled all his resources into himself and created his own world, until I came along, and Paul was my rock of Gibraltar and
yeah.
I was his light.
Yeah.
So when you get into true love, and I've seen true love over and over again, people think that it's dead in the water, but it's not. You see it. You can see it in a 15 and 16-year-old who later marry and have a family, maybe when they're 20 years old after they've done their study. You see it in second marriages. It's very common in the last 25 years, it's become very common in second relationships. People may marry, have a family, and then they go through divorce and separation, and sometimes that can be hostile and negative, and it can be depressive. But then somebody else comes through their life, and that second relationship doesn't come as love at first sight. It comes from the most powerful force of a union, and that is companionship. See, Paul and I grew out of companionship, helping and supporting each other. Love that grows out of companionship has another powerful thing.
Yeah.
If you want to balance your aura and keep it balanced at all times, you have to have a compassionate mind. If you have a compassionate mind, then you are at balance all times. So in someone who comes into a relationship and builds that relationship, the relationship is built on friendship and companionship over, could be just weeks, could be a couple of months,
Yeah.
it could be a couple of years, and they gravitate together. They're the long-lasting relationships, because love, all the colors of love, which is all pink, pale blue, they're all highly sensitive, highly emotional. They can change their shape and their face with just negative input by society or family. They can change their shape. But what doesn't change its shape is apricot. When apricot sits in there, it is companionship. So if it sits in with these loving things, which what you've got in your aura right now, if it sits in there, then you've got friendship. And love can be tested, love can be combated, but it will never ever dissipate, because friendship holds it together.
Yeah.
And that's true love.
Yeah, oh, that's kind of heart melting. I'm really lovely. It's lovely to see that, hear that you see some apricot in my aura.
Yep.
Yeah, lovely, and that means a lot to me. Thank you. I think you've written a number of things here. You've written everlasting relationships, marriage, friendships, business partners, your own children and grandchildren. There's quite a lot in there. So if you want
Yes.
to pick that apart one by one.
Well, we can pick it apart. I mean, we've just about done relationships and friendships. Companionship is like friendship. Companionship is someone you carry through life. An example I can give you is my mother and her friend. They met at their age in their early 40s, with children grown up. They found a few things in common. They're quite opposite. My mother is a highly stylish, elegant woman, even at the age of 98 that she is today. Always got her hair, always couture dressed, not expensive or anything like that, but very well groomed. Her friend Helen is a bit ragamuffin, right? Rag and tag. My mother has a spotless house because that's what she likes, and very, very well decorated. Her friend has a house that you have to put a peg on your nose to walk in the door, because the toilet doesn't get cleaned for 3 months. The food and the dishes are still on the sink. There's mildew on the food. That's how filthy it is. Opposites attract. So that caused me to look at the two of them. Were they soul families? No, they weren't. They've got what's called companionship. So opposites attract. And you get that in loving relationships as well. One of the things we'll talk about is combative relationships.
Yeah.
Combative relationships where she's got a strong personality, he's got a strong personality, and they scream at each other all the time, but they still have time for lovemaking. They still have time for a cuddle. They still ask each other's opinion. They still do all of that, but they scream. Their children sit in that relationship and think, do mum and dad hate them, hate each other? And the answer is no. There is such a thing as combative love. And that combative love, after their children have gone, and a lot of the stress and the tension come out of their work that's not there anymore. Maybe the finances of trying to provide for their family was in there as well. And the children, with all their different personalities and needs as they go through as teenagers, they can test anybody. And so they're gone. They're out, not adults running their own life. So all of a sudden, that competitiveness turns into companionship, simply because they've stood the test of time.
Yeah.
So competitive relationships, you can look at it and think, what the hell are those people doing together?
Yeah, well, it's a curious thing, because in one of my work roles, I help people who are going through difficult divorces, and I help, and there's a number of people who separate, who are encouraged by lawyers to think that I'm perfect. This other person's all at fault for the end of the relationship, and they try and
Yeah,
punish the other
yeah, yeah,
person
yeah,
by stopping contact with
yeah,
the children, preventing
yeah,
contact, making
yeah,
allegations, and
yeah,
the lawyers encourage them to make allegations to,
mm,
and it's a cash till for the lawyers
yeah,
because they get lots of court cases out of it, and they feed on the negative emotions that is from the breakup, the loss of that perfect relationship that they wanted. They may have been married for a long time, or they might
yes,
be in a
yes,
position where they've got a disadvantaged financial position and they're looking at the future on an equal basis is pretty tricky.
yeah,
And so I wonder what you think in terms of that from, because it quite often feels those people are locked in a place of hurt and they don't want to understand that we've grown apart, we've created two, three beautiful children, and actually we just need to accept we're moving on with a new chapter. We're no longer
yes, yes,
aligned.
yes, yes, yes,
And in a beautiful world, people would be able to process that stuff and let
yes,
go
yes,
of
yes,
that pain, I think. But
yes.
I just wonder what you think of that in terms of love.
Mhm. Well, there's a whole love is a big issue. That's why I wanted to talk about it today, because as I walk around the community, either here or around in different countries in the world or in Australia, the same patterns apply. And there's dysfunction in relationships in everybody's aura. When I was growing up, there wasn't, but
Yeah,
now there is.
right. Wow.
In the last 25 years, all of that has changed. We have throwaway relationships. We
Yeah,
don't have, let's look at the relationship and see what's of value there.
yeah,
Um, so, what you're saying is yes, lawyers do that. They behave that way to try and get the most out of the other person's wealth, um, sacrifice, right?
mm,
For the person they're representing. And that's the role of a lawyer. That's the role of a lawyer. But as far as relationships go, I can give you two examples. I've done lots of this. People, the most common question that people ask me, they come in and they get their aura done, and I'd say, "What can I do for you today?" And they'd say, "Oh, could you tell me if I'm going to meet the love of my life soon?" That's the most common question I get asked.
yeah,
People think that by finding the right person, there's no work to do. It's happy everlasting love, and
yeah,
that's not what it is, because you grow together,
yeah,
and to grow together, you have to challenge each other, and that's what happens in life. I mean, I jump out of bed at 4 o'clock every morning, and I'm like, as Paul gives an example and says, "Is everybody happy?" At 4 o'clock in the morning. He gets out of bed at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'm thinking, come on, I've already been up for 3 hours. You have to learn to live with each other. So
yeah.
if we look at relationships, the examples I'll give you, an older couple came to me to review what it was in their aura that kept them together under the stress that they were in.
Okay.
He was a manager in a business, a general manager in a business, devoted. They'd been married for 40 years, have children, grandchildren, great grandchildren. And a girl comes in, a new secretary comes in, and she's flirting with him, and he doesn't like it. He goes home and tells his wife that, it's irritating, but she's good at a job and I've got no reason to sack her, but it really getting on my nerves. That's what he says. And he says this for 3 months.
Right.
And then he goes off to the toilet, and she barricades him in the toilet.
Ah,
And anyway, certain things happen, and she videos it. Then she tries to blackmail him, right?
well,
And then she comes in 2 months later and says that she's pregnant. And he says, "Well, you can't be." And she said, "Well, I can be, and I've got this video to prove it." Anyway, they came to me because they didn't know what to do, right?
yeah,
They decided that it was causing so much tension that they would separate. And he was living in the family home unit that they had, a flat. She was living at home by herself because all the children had grown up. Anyway, the end of the story is that When they came to me, I looked at it and I went, oh my God, there's criminality here. There's criminality sitting in your aura. I said, right, I'm going to pull out some information. I'll write it all down, go to the police. So they went to the police. They found out that the girl was part of a scam with a boyfriend, and she was actually pregnant to the boyfriend. These things go on. So the wife, the family came back together. That was easy to do, but that's the stress that's there. I've got another couple that came to me to determine what it is that they should do. He was loving his wife, and he worked away a lot. He was a interstate truck driver, so he was away for days at a time. His wife got a bit lonely. She got involved with what I call a sexual predator, somebody who just wants to find somebody who's vulnerable. That's not a criminal thing. On my website, I've written a whole thing on sexual predators. Anyway, this fellow played on her vulnerability, and she started a relationship with him, hid it from her husband, found out that she was pregnant, didn't know what to do. So she decided that she would move in with him, which is what he wanted. She told him that she was pregnant. He didn't want any part of that. He wanted her to have an abortion. She didn't know what to do. She went to her grandmother, her soul family, part of her soul family, went to her grandmother. Her grandmother said, well, we're going to have a family meeting. So she got the parents there, and they had a family meeting, and then she decided that she'd best go back to her husband. And so then she had to face her husband that she was pregnant to another man. So think of what the souls are learning.
Yeah.
That's what I look at it. What are the souls learning? The souls are learning, my God, this is the biggest thing in your life. He should, by society's standards, say, well, you've done what you've done. You know, go off and cope by yourself. Don't ruin my life. But he didn't. He didn't. He said, I have always loved you. We've loved each other since we were teenagers. I won't stop loving you just because of this. I can't stop loving you because I love you.
Wow.
And they came to see me. And then I said to them, I said, right, now, what do we got? And they had, guess what they had in their aura? Apricot.
Really?
So apricot could weather any storms.
Wow.
Well, he helped her rear that child, and they had 2 other children in their relationship, and the 3 children grew up together. And then they came back to see me within a 10-year period and said, when should we tell our out-of-marriage child that she's not part of my husband's family, just part of who I am and what happened?
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I just said, not yet.
Okay. Wow.
So I said, you will know when it's right. So there's all these things that do happen that people need help and time. But then there's a young woman came to me to get her aura done, and she brought a boyfriend. I did their auras, did her aura. She was full of love, full of ambition, full of everything, the joy of love, waiting to get married, making all her wedding plans, all that stuff, right? All in her aura. He came in, and then there was mustard all down the corners of his legs, and little bits of brown in there, a little bit of fawn in there, a little bit of doe skin in there. And I'm going, uh-oh. So I decided to go deeper into the astral layer of the aura, which gives you all your details, and found out, and I pulled him to the back of where I was working so nobody could hear. And I said to him, I said, you're in another relationship. Does she know about it?
Wow.
And there are children in this relationship. Does she know about it?
Wow.
And she'd come walking in, and she was listening, and she said to him, is this true? And it turned out that he was married, had 3 children, and he'd been stringing her along, another sexual predator, stringing her along for 2 years. 2 years.
Wowza.
Yeah, I know. But you see, there's all different kinds of combative love.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
Fascinating.
that love, that relationship, of course, failed.
Yeah, of course.
Of course
Well,
it did.
and how fantastic that you were able to enable her to discover that.
Yeah, but there's lots of relationships out there
Yeah.
that are worth saving, and then
Yeah.
there's some that have completed their path, and they
Okay.
need to go their separate ways.
Okay. So I'm going to bring you back to the next one on your list, which was business partners.
Oh, business partners, yes, yes, business partners. Business partners can work or not work. When they have certain colours in there, orange, red, that shows that they're entrepreneurs, but they need other colours in there to be able to bind them together to respect each other. Most business partners that have good colours last the distance. Those who have sensitive and emotional colours in there don't last the distance.
Okay.
They go their separate ways. They buy each other out. Yeah, they seduce each other's wives. They do all these things. I've dealt with the whole lot of it.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
And then this one's an important, well, there's two bits to this, your own children and grandchildren. So I think that's a
Yes,
fascinating one to me for sure.
yes, 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 yes. It is fascinating
Hmm.
because, as I said, souls come in to learn as part of the soul family.
Yeah.
You could have a child that's born to you or adopted to you or fostered, right, to you, that doesn't relate. And no matter what you try as a parent, you can't understand that child. And the child doesn't want to understand you.
Yeah.
And you can be distant. And that's all got to do with what their learning is and what you're learning in. Yes, they're biological, right? But that doesn't mean to say that you can love them as much as you love your other children.
Right.
Because the lesson in that relationship is how to love at long distance,
Right.
how to love when someone doesn't like you or love you.
Okay.
A whole lot of lessons in there.
Right.
So because you have children doesn't mean to say that you will bond to all of those children. That's
Right.
what I've learned from the aura.
Yeah.
It was startling. I mean, I learned that about 40 years ago, but it's been startling. Some people who come to me, they've got an estranged son or a estranged daughter, and
Yeah.
when I go into their auras, I find, well, of course you have. There's not much of a bond other than a biological one, but there's not much of a bond.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's part of a sad, I think it's very sad. But it's part of the soul's learning.
Yeah. Because sometimes my perception or my own lived experience, sometimes, I've got two children who are now grown up now, and I've got my own mother and father and a brother. Sometimes the aspects of making an effort or putting time in and energy is really important, and you know, and then so sometimes I guess if that isn't put in, then the bond might not be quite there. Whereas if you put the effort in, time, attention, noticings, the bond will be strengthened.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Mm.
only because when you take certain actions, if you do caring, apricot comes into your aura. If you try to understand the person, where the person is coming from, pale blue comes in, which heightens your sensitivity and also expands your creative mind.
Yeah.
And if you are trying to understand what the person is doing with their life and tolerate some things about them, buttercup yellow comes into your aura, and it helps you to sort out practicality of things. So how you handle a situation, by responding to a situation, you get all of these very helpful supportive colors come into your aura. By rejecting it, you get the opposite. You get charcoal gray, and you go,
Yeah.
you start getting depressed. You have poor sleeping patterns. Your breathing becomes irregular. It can do a lot of damage. All the negative colors that come in, I say, yeah, well, mainly charcoal grey would be, and lemon green. Lemon green means that they are lying to you, and you could be lying to yourself. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I
They're
suppose that
very, very destructive, very destructive. They can cause illness, those colors.
Sure, and that particular word that you use there, lying to themselves and lying to other people is quite
Yes,
it has
yes,
a huge impact, can't it?
yes. Well, lemon green is a color that usually shows around the hands, and
Mm.
it shows how they're conducting their life. A woman may be in a relationship. She knows that her husband, for the last 25 years, has slept with at least 100 women, right? All through their marriage. She knows that that's a sexual predator. And so she knows that. She's lying to herself, or is she saying, he loves me, he's staying with me?
Yeah, yeah,
And then a greater thing that she could do for herself, what am I getting out of this? How am I growing out of this? And then she can answer those questions by, how does he treat her? He's paying for the bills. He comes home and has a meal with her. He takes her out to the movies. He goes on picnics with the children. Do you see what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah.
she puts all the values there, but he keeps doing what he's doing. So that's her lesson in life. But she has a degree on how she conducts her life. She has a degree of lemon green in her hands, showing that at times she's lying to herself, that he's not faithful to her. So she knows she's lying to herself. Yes. Mm.
Okay.
So lemon green can turn into all different parts. When it's under your feet, you're a liar and a cheat, and nobody should trust you. Yes.
Yeah.
Sexual predators, they're people who find gratification, conquering, self-empowerment, um, um, bonding in some ways from repetitive casual sex.
Mm.
And I've done a whole article on it. I've put them into sexual predators because that's their behavior to feed their psyche. And that's got lots of layers within that psyche. They do a lot of damage to their children, a lot of damage to their spouses, and a lot of damage to the people. Give you an example. Young girl comes to me and she says, when I say young girl, about 24 years old, she comes to me and says, could you check my aura, please? And I said, is there something you want me to check? And she said, a relationship, please. And so I checked the relationship and I said, I said, married man? And she said, yes. And I said,
We've got 1 minute left, Judith,
all
until we.
right. I said lemon green, which means he's lying. So he was trying to get her into bed. She's a friend of the wife. She didn't want to have a relationship with him, but he was trying to convince her that the relationship with his wife was over, just to
Okay.
get her into bed.
Okay, I'm going to press stop here, and then
Yep.
we'll have to either